We can also look at other reactions of some oxides of metals. Some oxides of metals can dissolve in water, and the ability of them to dissolve in water makes them to be what? An alkali. Some oxides of metals that can dissolve in water to form what? Hydroxide or alkali are what? Sodium oxide, potassium oxide, calcium what? Oxide. You see that we have sodium oxide dissolving in what? Water to give us sodium hydroxide, which is what? Alkali. You can have calcium oxide dissolving in water to give me what? Calcium hydroxide. These are also oxides of what? Metals. Okay, we can move on to look at reactions of metals, or some metals with what? Hydrogen. Remember that hydrogen is a reducing agent, but there are some metals that are more powerful or more electropositive or more reducing property than hydrogen. They can react with what? Hydrogen. And when those metals react with hydrogen, they form what? Hydride. Hydride has H- ion. This is what we call hydride. There are some metals that can react with hydrogen to form what? Hydride. Some of them are the group 2 and the what? Group 1 what? Metals. Sodium can react with hydrogen to form sodium hydride. Calcium can react with hydrogen to form calcium hydride. You see that there are some few metals that can react with hydrogen to form metallic what? Hydride. These hydrides can also dissolve in water to give alkali and liberate what? Hydrogen. We can have sodium hydride dissolving in what? Water to give me what? Sodium hydroxide and what? Hydrogen. We can have calcium hydride dissolving in water to give us calcium hydroxide and what? Hydrogen. That means that there are some metals that can react with hydrogen to form what? Hydride. We can look at nature of hydroxide of what? Metals. When we look at the activity series, some metals can form hydroxide. And when we look at some of them and their hydroxide, we find out that there are some hydroxide of metals that are stable to what? Heat. They will not decompose on what? Heating. These are the hydroxides of group 1 metals. Potassium hydroxide cannot be decomposed on heating. Sodium hydroxide cannot be decomposed on what? Heating. Other hydroxides can be what? Decomposed on what? Heating. If I have calcium hydroxide and we heat strongly, it's going to give me calcium oxide and what? Steam. If I have magnesium hydroxide and I heat very strongly, it's going to give me magnesium oxide and what? Steam. From any other one that can form hydroxide will decompose on what? Heating. But the group 1 will not, their hydroxide will not decompose on heating. We also look at another nature of hydroxide, their reaction with what? Water. Some of the hydroxide can dissolve in water. Some of the hydroxide will not dissolve in what? Water. Some hydroxide that can dissolve in water are potassium hydroxide is soluble in water, sodium hydroxide in what? Soluble in water, calcium hydroxide is sparingly soluble in water, but magnesium hydroxide is not soluble in water. Aluminum hydroxide is not soluble in water, and others. These ones that are soluble in water is called what? Alkali. The soluble hydroxide is called what? Alkali. And when you also look at reactions of hydroxide acts one as what? A base, which means they can react with what? Acids to form salt and what? Water. And also hydroxide can also react with ammonium salt to liberate what? Ammonia. Hydroxide can also react with what? Ammonium salt to liberate what? Ammonia. So these are some properties of hydroxide. Now, we are still going to look at reaction of metals with water. It also depends on the activity what? Series. There are some metals that can react with 1. Cold water. There are some metals that can react with hot or steam. There are some metals that cannot react with water in any temperature. The reactions of metals with water depends on the what? Activity what? Series. For cold water, potassium can react with cold water. Sodium can react with cold water. Calcium can react with what? Cold water. But the rate of their reaction decreases from potassium to what? Calcium. Potassium will react with water explosively, forming flames. Sodium will react with water vigorously, while calcium will react with water in bubbles. And each of them, when reacts with water, will form alkali. So when potassium reacts with cold water, it's going to give us potassium hydroxide and what? Hydrogen. The hydrogen that is formed due to the reaction is what? Exothermic reaction. Heat is liberated. Will now be ignited to start burning. And it burns with what? Lilac flame. it burns with what? Lilac flame. So potassium reacts isothermically with cold water, giving a lilac flame. When you come to sodium reacting with cold water, you'll find out that sodium ball will be darting, jumping, dancing on top of cold water and melting with a yellow flame to form an alkaline solution. Sodium ball will react with what? Cold water to give us sodium hydroxide. The reaction is also isothermic. The reaction is also isothermic. If you have an ordinary water that you place a litmus and you add sodium to it, after a time, the litmus will become what? Blue, telling you that it has become alkaline, which means the sodium has reacted with cold water to give us hydrogen and the what? Sodium hydroxide, which is an alkali. But when it comes to calcium, calcium will react with cold water slowly to give us calcium hydroxide. And as you increase the temperature, the reaction rate will do what? Increase. That is how sodium, potassium, and calcium react with what? Cold water. Magnesium cannot react with cold water, but magnesium can react with hot water or steam to form oxide and what? Hydrogen. Once magnesium has been ignited and steam passes through it, magnesium oxide and hydrogen will be what? Formed. So we see that some metals can react with cold water, some cannot. Some can react with what? Steam. Iron are very hot, can react with steam reversibly. Iron at very high temperature can react with what? Steam reversibly to form oxide of what? Iron and the what? Hydrogen. It is a reversible reaction. It reacts with what? Steam are very hot. But from steam downwards, they can never react with water in any temperature. But from steam down to what? Gold can never react with water in any form or any what? Temperature. So these are some of the ways that metals can react with what? Water. Some can react with cold water, some can react with hot or steam, some can never react with water in any form.